range. Stuff like that. Well, I was confronted with when I was doing my PhD, and it was about the year 1990 that I started working on my PhD. And I was working on an automatic gain control for hearing instruments. And I really made a lot of effort to make a low power design. And at that time I really had a low power design, but still, so here's the design. So still it was an analog design, I was still, 4 orders away from what fundamentally should be possible. And I was thinking, how do I get there? How do I get there? So basically that made me think about it. So I was working on design methodologies for low power and low voltage circuits, etc. And I was also thinking, should I really do this in the digital domain? Well, now the fact that the curves are more or less here means that it makes perfect sense if you're working in a hearing instrument not to do it analog anymore. Unless the technology is cheaper. But if you can afford to do the transition from analog to digital by an A to D converter, then it's much better to have all the signal processing done in the digital domain. And then only later you go back to the analog domain and offer to a loudspeaker. Right? This was also an important thing. Right? In some systems it is not required to, or not convenient to go first from analog to digital, do signal processing, simple signal processing, then go back to the analog domain. Then you may think, well, perhaps it's better to stay in the analog domain, allow a little bit more current consumption for my signal processing functions, but at least I don't have to make a transition by an A to D converter that also consumes power and a D to A converter. So this is basically what started, was the start of this. I wanted to know, how do I get closer to this? Well, the design, by the way, of this automatic gain control was what I would call a current domain A to D current domain automatic gain control. The input quantity was a current, the output quantity was a current. There were hardly any passive components in there. I think there was one capacitor and a handful of transistors. Well, a big handful, about 30, 40 transistors. That was basically it. There's also something that you will experience when you go to the really low power regime. You cannot use resistors anymore. We will talk about that later. So, what I will be talking about first, I will look into the transistor modeling. We will concentrate on CMOS, and then later I will tell a little bit about bipolar. It's interesting, I come from a bipolar background. The bipolar is something like a lost art nowadays. Everybody is talking about CMOS. But basically, one of the best components that you would like to have would be a bipolar without base current. So the combination of CMOS and BJT, that would be the best device if you ask me. Because bipolars, they really are close to the Boltzmann's equations. So they have a nice exponential behavior that you can rely on. For MOS devices, yeah, they have these funny operating regimes like weak inversion, strong inversion, in between moderate inversion. They have the conduction regime, they have the saturation regime. Bipolars don't have that. They stay exponential over their entire lifetime. Even the worst bipolar is still fundamentally exponential. Right? One thing that we can already appreciate is that CMOS, if you go into low current densities, also becomes a bipolar. And the reason for that is that CMOS at higher currents is dominated by majority carriers. So then the geometry of your CMOS device plays a role. If you take out these carriers, then at some point they become a minority. And then it is a minority